me tell you, Star Wars always had the vibe of being in the most whitest elite space. Like, this franchise is so white that it's like a black person existing in that was something.
When people watch The Hate You Give, what do you want them to walk away with? Because I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
And you can always tell it's something when some Star Wars fans try to say, well, we had Lando Calrissian and had Samuel L. Jackson.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal.
May the Force be with you.
They're okay with us playing the best friend. But once we touch their heroes, once we lead, once we trailblaze, it's like, oh my God, it's just a bit too much.
Unless you're MAGA, then you can go force yourself.
He's such a great character. She's so smart.
If I were a rich white dude, I'd kill everybody just to get away with it.
And I just couldn't understand how people couldn't imagine a really smart, nerdy girl with terrible eyesight and who loved to solve mysteries could not be Indian.
I thought lesbians were good at solving crimes. It's like the one positive stereotype perpetuated by cop shows.
The strangest thing about modern Hollywood isn't that it's failing. Failure can be accidental, failure can be fixed, but what we're watching now is something far more precise, more ideological. A class of cultural managers, writers, producers, executives declaring in effect that they no longer like the people they're selling to, and you see it in the posture, in the PR spin, in the thinly veiled disgust. The implicit message is no longer, we make stories for you. It's, we make stories, despite you. Believe it or not, this wasn't always the case. The modern entertainment empire was built by giving regular people exactly what they wanted, stories that honored their instincts. Good versus evil, sacrifice over cynicism, heroes with clarity. Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Superman, Indiana Jones were never really vehicles for ideology, they were the ideology. Moral courage, loyalty, purpose, and more than that, they assumed the audience was decent, worth speaking to, worth respecting. In the middle of the 2010s, the people running the machine stopped thinking of the audience as a community and started viewing them as a threat. Not politically aligned, not sufficiently evolved, just too nostalgic, too white, too male, too attached to mythologies that, frankly, made the new class uncomfortable.
It's not a secret, I'm the first of color, you know? So I thought also it would be beautiful to bring something that was of our people.
They now see major franchises as skin. What's underneath that skin is a delivery system for ideology, for affirmation, for what the industry insists is progress, but somehow always ends up looking like disdain for you, for your values, for your memories. And the strange part is somehow they still want your money. They just don't want your input or your expectations or your presence, unless you're there to clap.
We don't change anything, but we interpret everything. It is everything for people of color. It is everything to progress forward.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
On October 2021, mainstream news outlets ran the same headlines. New Superman comes out as bisexual.
Now, DC Comics has announced that its latest Superman will be bisexual.
And I remember thinking, okay, why is this a headline? Not in a cynical way, not even political. It's Superman, right? Why is his sexuality the main event?
When I was offered this job, I thought, well, if we're going to have a new Superman for the DC universe, well, it feels like a missed opportunity to have another straight white savior.
Then you find out it's not Clark, but his son, John Kent, a character that most people barely knew existed, a side note who was suddenly front page news, all just in time for a headline, a rollout, National Coming Out Day, rainbow banners, carefully coordinated interviews.
We've seen a lot of LGBT superheroes in the past couple of decades, and some of them are not quite household names. But when you can attach something like this to the name Superman, who's known around the world, people will pay attention.
I realized it had less to do with Superman and more to do with what that moment represented. But it was about the moment, the press cycle, the social points. The character was a delivery system for the announcement.
His sexuality isn't the only way the character has been updated. In recent editions, he's been advocating for refugees and fighting the climate crisis. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Or is it social change?
The trick is, Hollywood still pretends it's making stories, while all it's doing is manufacturing gestures, symbols, and the audience, especially the fans who grew up with this stuff, are now seen as obstacles, roadblocks. People whose attachment to the original meaning of these stories gets in the way of the new purpose, which is to tell you what to care about and how loudly to clap when it happens. But see, fans didn't reject the character because he was bisexual. They rejected him because the character wasn't a character. He was a mouthpiece, a mascot.
And people saying for the first time ever, they're seeing themselves in Superman, something they never thought was possible.
And in that shift from character to symbol, Hollywood gave away the game. All they care about is applause. It didn't start with Superman, nor did it end with him. Amazon's Rings of Power might be the most expensive fan insult in history.
This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth.
And I don't mean because they changed an elf's skin tone. The real insult was what they did to the bones of the thing. Tolkien's Second Age, if you've read even a fraction of the appendices, is slow, tragic, and massive. A world about the long decline of great powers, the creeping poison of pride, the way good intentions collapse into ruin. Amazon looked at that and said, what if we just skipped to the fireworks? And fine, adaptation means change. But you can't really call it an adaptation. It's more like they raided his work and stitched together something entirely new, took the names, the settings, a few loose events, and filled in the rest with characters that speak like Reddit threads.
Despise not the labor which humbles the heart. Humility has saved entire kingdoms, the proud of all but led to ruin.
Flattened the cosmology, replaced divine providence with trauma arcs and girl boss quips, and shoved centuries into a single TV season because, well, short attention spans. And when longtime fans noticed when they said, hey, this doesn't feel like Tolkien, the response was accusation. You're a purist, a gatekeeper, you're patently evil. Of course, that's the trick. They need the backlash. The outrage validates the pivot. They count on fans to protest because it gives them a foil. You push back on the reimagining and you're standing in the way of progress because that's how they justify hollowing out the myth in the first place. Luke Skywalker stood alone in front of the Empire and tossed his lightsaber aside rather than kill his own father. They turned that to a hermit who drinks green milk from a space cow, and they called it nuance. But it's really contempt. Contempt for the past, contempt for the fan who believed in the myth. Because in order to justify the new, you have to desecrate the old. And not just retire it, you have to embarrass it, mock it, turn Luke into a cautionary tale, turn Picard into a confused old man being corrected by morally superior interns. Tear down the father figures, the leaders, the mentors. Replace them with committees and vibes. Because if there's one thing these new writers hate, it's authority that doesn't apologize for existing. They can't stand competence, confidence, tradition, anything that suggests meaning exists outside of feelings. So they rewrite the myths. They turn swords into statements, and the stories become sermons. And once you start noticing it, you can't unsee it. You realize these stories stopped being stories because stories require faith. Faith in arcs, in consequences, in good and evil. Faith that the old symbols still mean something. But if you believe in anything fixed, you're in the way. So they sand it all down, smooth it, and make it digestible. And if you resist, if you remember what it used to feel like to be moved by a story, they treat you like a threat. Because Hollywood doesn't want an audience. All they want is applause.
This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country.
And one more question. What does it mean to be a woman in film?
It means it's really hard. And if you're a woman of color, then it's really, really hard.
You ever get the feeling a company hates you? Not just annoyed by you, not indifferent. I mean deep, visceral. If we could replace you with a more obedient demographic, we would do it yesterday kind of hate. That's the vibe Hollywood gives off now, especially if you've got even one toe dipped in anything resembling traditional values or basic taste. It used to be a little eye roll, a weird line in a script, a bait and switch in a trailer. But it's now actors and directors getting online and proudly telling you they made the show just to piss you off. Because that's what they're doing, not just with Star Wars, with everything. You've got people working on Doctor Who literally celebrating that their casting is going to make fans angry. Like that's a goal. Not even pretending anymore that it's about the role or the story or the fans. And here's where people usually say, Well, who cares? It's just entertainment. But that's the point. It was entertainment. Now it's a loyalty test. These people have stopped asking for your attention and went straight to demanding your obedience. It's hard to explain to someone who didn't grow up with this stuff how much it meant. I'm not just talking about movies. It's that weird connection people used to have with a good story, the kind you rewatch with your kid, the kind that feels like home. They've taken that and turned it into a political weapon. You still like Lord of the Rings? Cool. Here's a version where Galadriel is a smug sociopath and all the nuance is gone because we wrote it like a Twitter thread. Amazon went on a campaign against their fans after the show dropped, warning everyone that the backlash was all from trolls. They had obviously pre-labeled the audience as the problem before anyone even watched the thing. And then it flopped, and then they blamed the audience again. When the Marvels tanked, they blamed misogyny. When Velma was panned by basically everyone, they blamed anti-woke trolls. There's this weird new genre of post-mortem where instead of saying, yeah, maybe the writing was off, the creators and producers double down and accuse the crowd of moral failure. The bar is no longer, did people like it? It's, did it own the people we don't like? I mean, imagine trying that in any other industry, but Hollywood is way too insulated, propped up by streaming contracts and political capital. They can lose hundreds of millions and still act like they won something, like the culture war is worth bleeding for, even if the field is empty. We can't really blame arrogance anymore. It's a controlled demolition of trust at this point. You used to walk into a movie theater assuming at minimum that the people making the thing wanted you to enjoy it. Now you walk in knowing they might spend 2 hours mocking people like you. Maybe not overtly, but it's there. A tone, a smirk, a script note that says, we know who you are, and you're the punchline. Even actors who built their careers on fan love have gotten in on it.
May the force be with you. Unless you're MAGA, then you can go force yourself.
Hey, he can vote however he wants, but imagine telling any subset of your audience to go screw themselves publicly and still expecting to sell them tickets. But this is what happens when art becomes activism. The story stops being the priority. What matters now is the signal. Did we cast correctly? Did we make the right people mad? Did we include all the required talking points? And when those boxes are checked and people still don't show up, that's your fault, not theirs. But you don't make a great film by reverse engineering it from discourse on Reddit.
67% of the top critics reviewing the 100 highest grossing movies in 2017 were white males.
That Agatha is the gayest project Marvel has ever done. Agree?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Why is it?
You'll see. You'll see when you watch it. But, you know, I think witches are queer inherently just because we are outcast and, like, set aside for many reasons. And I think this show shows a really good representation of different types of people and that we can all use the power we have within to, like, go forth and be great.
If you grew up on Doctor Who, Star Wars, Star Trek, even the MCU, then you carry with you a memory of what these franchises were before they were weaponized. And memory in times like these is dangerous. It's proof that it didn't always have to be like this, that stories didn't always read like diversity training manuals or open mic nights for student activists, that the imagination once stretched toward mystery, not moral instruction. But that's the problem. You. Remember. They hate that you remember, so they smear you. It can't be that you're not nostalgic, you must be regressive. You're not invested, you must be fragile. You don't want a good story, you're just mad a woman's holding the lightsaber. And that's the line. Every critique is lazily filed under phobia or ism because it's easier than confronting the actual complaint that the product is bad, not offensive, just bad, as in poorly constructed, emotionally hollow, narratively incoherent. But this didn't start with fans pushing back. It started when writers, producers, and corporations decided the existing fan base, the one that built the house, was no longer useful. Worse, they were now the enemy. I like how Star Trek once presented complex moral questions. What makes someone human? When does security become tyranny? It's now just a parade of finger-wagging lectures wrapped in space jargon. Zero curiosity, just modern talking points stapled to 24th century aesthetics. Every line of dialogue has been workshopped to death to make sure it checks the right boxes. Characters incapable of actually speaking, they deliver statements now. Conflicts don't arise, they're assigned. Stories don't reveal anything. All they do is enforce. And they could have gotten away with it. They could have done all of this quietly, subtly, with half-decent writing. Most people aren't ideological, they don't mind diverse casts or moral complexity, but Hollywood told you it wanted tolerance when it really just wanted submission. They rewired your favorite franchises, installed surveillance, and dared you to complain. So now you get called a bigot for pointing out that The Last Jedi had no coherent arc. You get called sexist for saying Doctor Who stopped being fun. You get dogpiled for noticing that The Rings of Power rewrote Tolkien into something that feels like LinkedIn than legend. The fact that the writing is objectively worse doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is your compliance. That's the real story here. Not diversity, not representation. Obedience. It's really about control. Ideological control over cultural spaces that once gave people genuine joy and escape. And the worst part is, these spaces used to unite people. Conservative, liberal, apolitical, it didn't matter. You could argue Kirk versus Picard for hours and never once know who someone voted for. That's what Hollywood killed. Neutrality. They turned neutral ground into battlegrounds, and then they blamed the audience for noticing. And no, this isn't a conspiracy. It's just what happens when people who view art as activism gain control of platforms that once valued storytelling. They don't believe in art for art's sake. They don't believe in imagination for its own sake. Everything is a means to an end, and the end is always the same: re-education. They'll say, art has always been political. Yes, but it's never been this obedient. The old stories provoked thought, these ones prevent it. The old characters revealed something about human nature. These ones are here to demonstrate approved attitudes. The old writers challenged power, these ones enforce it. So when fans push back, when they criticize, when they say, this isn't the story I loved, they're mourning replacement. Because it's not just that the shows got bad, it's that the new writers looked at everything fans cared about and chose to tear it down.